Roll call. Bonnie Elliott. Absent. James Langhorne.
Here.
Ken McClellan.
Here.
Stephen Metch. Absent. Juliet Sponsel.
Here.
Vincent Wood.
Here.
Marcia Zillis. Absent.
Mr. Chair, Andrew Stuffler's here as secretary.
Sorry, I didn't mention your name.
All right.
Are there anything in the amendments
Mr.
for the
Chair,
agenda?
yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd like the board to consider revising the order of the agenda and putting item 6 ahead of item 5, because I believe item 5 might take a little more time.
Okay.
That would be something you'd want to ask the board if they would entertain and maybe vote on.
I would like to vote. Someone would like to take a vote on that?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Approval of the minutes from our last meeting. Does anyone have any question or comments?
I don't have any.
Is there a motion to approve?
Make a motion, we approve the minutes.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Good man. Convenience.
At this point, we have any other public comment? Okay, we'll move on to the. So we want to do.
Yeah. Item 6.
Anapamu.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the subject is a hardship ratification of 26 West Anapamu.
Mr. Chair, let me, this is Andrew Stuffler, building official for the city. What the board has before them is what's become now our routine ratification. They can, if they like, the architect and permit applicant can step up to the microphone or sit at the end of the table down there. But since this is an item that I, as the building official, bring to the board, and I bring it to the board for ratification in accordance with the building code, because the building code requires that if my office issues an unreasonable hardship, that it has to be ratified by the board.
These things working?
They work if you put the microphones work if you put them within a couple inches of your mouth. Otherwise, they don't pick up much. So what we have before you relative to the 26 West Anapamu is a Westmont College campus tenant improvement project. And in trying to get the disabled access, the accessible bathrooms configured in the existing building, we reached a point when you look at the request for hardship form on the back of the page 2 of it, you'll see they reached a point where to make the restrooms completely accessible, they were going to be in the $55,000 range, and this was to pick up several inches that were necessary to have the adequate clearance for door swing and the 60-inch circle that doesn't pass underneath fixtures. So we looked at it. It seemed very reasonable what they were requesting. We approved the request for hardship with an understanding that they are at risk to do work until the board ratifies it. So the board's under no obligation to ratify this if you see otherwise, but as the building official, I would recommend ratification of it. And with that, if the architect wants to provide any comment, that would certainly be appropriate.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
You said that you had your conversation with a handicapped person that's on this board, or?
Yeah, speak into the microphone. It's kind of awkward, but
I know the person that usually specializes in handicaps not present, but you conversed with him related to this thing?
This was reviewed by our certified access specialist, our CAS professional in our office, who's
So
also a licensed
wheelchair and all
architect.
that for
Yes.
turnability, there's not going to be a problem,
That's correct.
even though it's a mere 2 inches.
That's correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, my name is Michael Holliday. We're the architects for the project. Michelle Swanitz is our project manager. She can answer more of the detail, but I'll just give you a little bit of an overview. We've worked very closely with Andrew, and this is our first introduction to this process, so we're all here to learn. Appreciate everybody being part of this board, because I think this is a great process to kind of work through. On this specific project, if you read through our request, we're literally 3/4 of an inch off with one overlap and 2 inches off the other overlap. If there was an easy fix, we've kind of already worked through this with Andrew and the building department, we would do it, but there's not. It's like a disproportionate cost, $55,000 to move a few inches. It just gets to be ridiculous, and the whole project sort of becomes infeasible. So that's why we're here today, and hopefully we think this is a reasonable request, and we hope that you concur. If there's any more detailed questions, we can get into that, but that's kind of a simple overview.
Board have any questions? Jim?
I do. This accessibility issue has been beaten up for many years, 30 years at least, and the perspectives people have taken to it have changed radically. And the last time that I really had to suffer with it, I was doing a project management issue, and I had a wheelchair ramp that was poured concrete. Very experienced contractor, done a lot of public work and that sort of thing, and I was off by 0.5% on my slope. We had to tear the whole thing out, and this is after I tried to call every favor I could with the arbiters of all this, which was the Department of Justice. I would surmise that in the last 10 years there may be some latitudes or some more reasonable approach being taken to hardships like this, and I'd really like to bring myself up to date with what those things are. What is the standard of care anymore? Andrew, is there anything we could do for the future? Because we're seeing quite a few of these things, I think.
Mr. Chair, board members, so that this is sort of in response to that. So what was happening, at least in the state of California, building officials were issuing waivers or hardships, but there was no ratification. So from a public benefit standpoint, there was a perception that depending on which building department you went to, you may or may not have to have the same level of accessibility. So the state established a Certified Access Specialist program. It's called a CASP. And they require that every building department have a CASP, certified professional, on their staff. But we have one, Elizabeth Sorgman, who's also a licensed architect. And in doing that, they increased the general level of understanding of accessibility compliance in the building departments. And then they added this ratification process, which sort of further made public the decisions of the building department to dispel the perception that building officials are, if they like you, you don't have to do the restroom, and if they don't like you, you have to do the restroom kind of thing. So now it's all out in the public realm.
Sorry.
That's it. And that's the end of my story.
Okay.
Thank you.
So
Does that answer?
I think so.
Yeah.
So, Andrew, what you're saying is that staff's already reviewed this and is supporting this? Okay, great. Thank you.
Is there any other questions from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? So at this point, we're going to need a
You can ask for a motion.
motion.
I make a motion that we
Yes.
ratify the request for the variance.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Just off the record, Jim, this is exactly what this process is all about, to ratify that, to get us out of those ridiculous kind of situations that you were in with a ramp that's so darn close. So thank you very much. This is a great service for all of us that have to build stuff.
Okay. Okay. Going to move move back up to the 1215 East Coda. Would like the staff like to present?
Mr. Chair and members of the board, Joe Porre, I'm the Santa Barbara City Fire Marshal, and there's not a lot for me to present here, but I will cover the basic background. By the way, with me is a supervisor of the Fire Prevention Bureau, Jim Austin, and going back to March 27th, a single-family home was proposed to us by the applicant, and in that proposal, and if you're looking at the attached documents, there's a very narrow lot involved. And one of the things that the applicant wanted to do was put an accessory building at the rear of the property. When that proposal came through, what she wanted to do was put a second floor on a bedroom kind of pass-through on the driveway. The driveway is not conforming for us in the first place. Our usual standard of 16 feet to within 150 feet doesn't exist on this property. It's existing non-conforming. It's a very old piece of property. And that driveway would not assist us in getting to the rear of the property. So having the covered garage pass-through or bedroom on the second floor was not a significant factor for us when we looked at it. But the main thing is that this type of variance that we're dealing with is a fairly common issue. We do this kind of thing on a regular basis, and it's a very standard, not really particularly controversial type of variance for the fire marshal to make. The appellant in this particular case has claimed that it's highly unusual, and in fact that there's a code section that prohibits it. None of that is true. As Mr. Langhorn here, who's a former fire marshal himself, knows, there's a great deal of latitude in the code. And part of the reason is because the code is not a black and white, is not supposed to be viewed as a black and white document, and in fact isn't a black and white document. Some of the things that I've attached for you here today, on the first attachment, 104.8, the modification allowance in the code, specifically gives the fire marshal that latitude. That's one of the code sections involved. Another one on page 1 is 503.1.1. And the modification section is something that we use on a routine basis. On 503.1.1, that section basically describes the buildings and facilities where the fire marshal is specifically granted to exceed the 150-foot access way distance that is described in the code if a building is sprinkled. Now, when we adopted the code, we have the option of changing all these sections. We can add or delete and make, as long as we don't do something that contravenes what the state wants, we can change sections around. We deliberately left that section in to give us that kind of latitude. So we have kind of a double allowance here. We have the regular code modification, and we have this section here that says that if the building is sprinkled, that we can extend that distance just as a matter of law. So when we look at these kinds of things, we look at them from a practical common sense basis with the code to back us up. But what we're looking at is, does this make sense from a fire safety perspective? And in this particular case, it was a very easy decision to make. The accessory structure that's talking about is going to be sprinkled. It's mostly garage. It's not a hazardous facility, and it's got an accessory to it that may or may not be a studio or an office or whatever, but it's the minority of the square footage involved. So when you look at the accessory structure and you look at the existing single-family home in the front, the overall impact is not particularly great. Now, in this particular case, if you look at the annotated site plan that I attached as attachment number 4, you can see that Actually, as you're looking at it from here, and I'm going to dispense with the north, south, east, west references, and just say on the right-hand side at the top of the page, you can see these orange dashed lines. Those lines represent an area that we told the applicant that she was going to have to leave open for firefighter pass-through. In the unlikely event that we wouldn't be able to make it underneath the overhang of the new second-floor bedroom. It was probably an abundance of caution on my part, but it was just one of those things that we added to say, okay, in the event that we want to advance a hose line down the right side of the property, we would have that option, and it would remain open to us, and that would, we're going to have that in perpetuity. Typically what we would do, we would advance a hose down the driveway, even underneath the overhang, if there were an event at the back of the residence. If it were a medical emergency, they would simply walk down the driveway. It's really not that much of a problem for us to even consider. But in any case, both buildings are going to be sprinkled. As near as I know, the front house is going to be sprinkled voluntarily because we don't believe that was going to rise to the level of needing to be sprinkled in the first place. And the rear building, and there was one more code section. I don't want to inundate you with code sections, but one more code section that allows that type of occupancy, a U occupancy under a certain square footage, to not be sprinkled. In this particular case, they were going to sprinkler it anyway. It was the applicant's intent to sprinkler it. So that gives us that 503.1.1 exception because basically it's a voluntary sprinkler system. Now, there is a possibility that the building division, when they got a hold of the plans to actually review the project, would say that's too much accessory. You have to cut back on the accessory use if you want to keep it a U. And we go through that negotiation process because the actual occupancy designation had not been made yet. But we felt comfortable overall that the existence of sprinklers in that occupancy in the rear was going to be the mitigating factor. And the other thing about this project is that it's so routine and so within the realm of the fire marshal's duties on a regular basis that in 32 years, I've actually never seen. I've been challenged a lot as the fire marshal. I've actually never seen someone challenge the right to do my job. Certainly the methodologies and decision-making and all that comes up from time to time. And you, as a fire marshal, you certainly get into a lot of adversarial situations. But this one, by code, is something that's part of the fire marshal's duties. If we lived in a black and white world, we'd never get anything built. In any case, my belief in this particular case is that what we're really talking about here is a failed view appeal, and it's really, the views are not part of the fire department's purview. Public safety is. So in short, and I don't want to go on too long here, but in short, the fire department, the city, we believe that this is well within the right of the fire marshal to do. These types of variances come up all the time, and we're comfortable with our decision. So our appeal to you today is to reject the appeal. And if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. At this point, too, the chair would like to excuse himself for any question or comment, conflict of interest, but I still will be your chair. At this point, does the board have any questions for Fire Marshal?
I'm lost on what the appeal is. I still can't figure it out.
I have a question.
Yeah, what are we appealing here?
Let's start with the chair has, it sounds like, recused himself from making a decision on this, and you might want to clarify why, just so that.
The reason is this property, we work with our company works with the owner of this property.
Yeah.
Carroll Plumbing. 1272. It's our Carroll Plumbing.
Yeah. Okay, so the chair's recused himself. We only need a.
Okay, yeah, okay.
It sounds like the appropriate thing to do. And
as a matter of a courtesy suggestion, I think under your rules, if the chair has to recuse himself for that reason, he's well advised, maybe his suggestion to just back out of the room and not be part of the process at all.
That's fine, if that is the pleasure of the, certainly.
Yeah, no.
But I'm
That's fine.
thinking that my background and experience, that would be the prudent thing to do, and if you're not going to be voting anyhow, why should you control what's going on?
That's fine, if you
Ben,
want
can I
to, if you
pass
want
the
to
chair
step out,
Huh?
I'll take over.
Yeah? I'm going to pass the chair over to Andrew.
Secretary, yeah. So
Secretary.
unless someone else on the board would like to be
Yeah,
the chair.
I want to ask the far.
We'll continue discussions in a moment. I just want to make sure the board is okay with me acting as chair, as the chair steps out.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Is everyone okay with that?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Wait.
We're not voting on the matter,
I'm
Juliet.
voting.
We're voting
Juliet.
on.
Do that next.
Good.
We will. We'll get to that.
Are we good?
Yeah, we'll get to that. We're getting to a point where I'm going to remove myself, and Andrew's going to take over.
Are you good with that? Okay. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Point of order. Do we have a quorum with?
Yeah, I anticipated those questions. So, because we had only 5 people, 3 board members are all that's necessary. It's kind of an unusually low quorum count, but that's in the municipal code for this board.
Yeah, no, I hear.
I'll use your guideline here. Okay, so we've received a staff report on the decision of the fire marshal relative to 1215 East Coda, and now we're opening the floor to, not opening the floor, we're letting the board ask questions of the staff member before we hear from the appellant. You'll have another opportunity to ask questions
Can I ask
later.
him a question?
That's what we're doing right now, yes.
All right. On the elongated section that you were really concerned about for being able for the fire department to come in, is that because the floor level of the building is hampering it?
No, this
Or
is,
because of the width of it?
no, this is actually open yard. The street out here, this section right here with the dashed lines, that's the part that we wanted to keep open, just in the event that this covered area was for some reason blocked.
Oh, okay. I thought when you were talking about it, you were talking about that.
Right. That's,
Okay.
That's just an extra way to advance a hose line down to the rear of the property.
Right. Okay.
Vincent, did you have a question for the fire marshal on the nature of the appeal?
Well, yeah, I'm. What is the owner doing here that I'm lost? What they're doing that bothers you?
It's nothing actually. The owner of the property isn't doing anything that bothers me, and that's why this appeal is kind of unusual. Is that this is not a decision that I made that someone is appealing because I made a decision that was a draconian to their property. What we did was the application came in for a variance on something that the applicant wanted to build, and we approved it. And so what's unusual about this is that the neighbor, the appellant here, is the person who's appealing my decision, and they'll explain their position and why they're appealing it. But that's what's unusual about this, is that the person who wants to build a house is not appealing it. It's the neighbor.
All right, thank you.
Any other board questions of staff at this time? Okay, hearing none. Thank you. We'll hear from the appellant.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to keep one for the record, yes. And since we're only doing an audio recording of this, we're receiving a handout of documentation from the appellant. I was giving, yeah, thank you. Okay, floor is yours.
Thank you.
Copy of what was just distributed today?
Sure. You can have ours.
I'm happy to give it back to you for the record. Thank
Yes, but I'm going to use it and I'll give it to you at the end.
Okay, I was just saying, go back.
Did you still need a copy right now?
No, I'm acting as chair and I don't vote, so, and I don't comment unless asked.
All right.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tony Fisher. I'm an attorney. I have been around this system longer than Joe Piori. And I represent the neighbor, Roger Goldtrap, and with me is Trevor Martinson, an architect. He has far more detailed information about this project than I do, but what I want to do is take you through an outline of why there's an appeal, the basis for the appeal, why we think this decision of the fire marshal, which was basically done in 2014, more than a year ago, is flawed, does not qualify for an exception or a modification or a variance under any of these codes, and that it is a bad precedent for the city and in particular for this neighborhood to be allowing additional construction outside the normal realm, normal range for fire and emergency personnel access to the building. I have given you a stack of papers. I think there are 9 or 10 sheets. Prominent on the first page is the aerial photo, and I apologize, some of you have color, some of you have black and white. I personally think the black and white is equally good. The middle of that photo shows the red arrow or the arrow and the word 1215 East Coda Street, which shows you the lot in question. And as you can see, this is a 225-foot deep lot that goes to the middle of the block. And in the back of all of these lots, you see a lot of Santa Barbara grass. It's brown in the picture, and it's probably very brown now. That whole area back there, if you try to figure out how to get fire apparatus or fire personnel or emergency responders into that area, you don't have an access. And so what I'd like you to do is, if you look at the next page, it shows you the assessor's parcel map that helps you orient yourself as to the layout of the block and the area on that side of Coda Street. And so you can see what goes on there. And you know, you look at that flag lot, the big one in the middle, number 8, and you might think it has an access, but if you look at the aerial, it doesn't. It does not have an access from Coda Street. The next picture, the next item in the collection has got some yellow highlighting, and this is actually taken from a drawing submitted by the applicant. The corner of it has been blown up a bit because the print was extremely small, and I have taken the liberty of typing and adding as notes some of the information about the accessory building. The accessory building is not an accessory building, it's living space. It is 15 feet wide by 22 feet long. It has a covered patio on the back with French doors. It has 2 separate entrances, and in the corner, unable to be seen by most of our eyesight, that's why I blew it up, it says you have the 1/2 bath with water closet and sink, and then next to it you have a second sink called a bar sink, and then you have an under-counter refrigerator. This is not a storage room. This is not an accessory to a garage. This is living space. It's got French doors, windows. It's got a separate.
I'm sorry.
Should we wait? I think we need to.
I think you should.
We can wait. We can take a. We'll wait. We'll wait for a moment. There
Okay,
we go.
we're back. This is a room, where I grew up, which was not in Santa Barbara. If you had this kind of room attached to your garage, it would be the best neighborhood party room you could ever have. It's got a sink, a bathroom, a refrigerator. It's big enough. 15 by 22 is good size. It also could be a guest quarters. It's big enough for bedroom. You can put a queen-size bed, king-size bed. You could have bunk beds. This is a room that does not meet in any way the U category that the fire marshal was talking about. This is a room that is intended to be used either as an office, part of a vacation rental. It could be used as anything because of where it is and how it's located. And there's something else about the layout of this lot that you need to understand. The house is on the street end of the lot. The three-car garage is down at the next end, 225 feet from one end to the other. Cars are not likely on a regular basis to be driven down to the end of the lot, put in the garage, and then you have to walk all the way back up to the house in order to get from the garage to the house. The cars are going to stay up by the house or out on the street because that's the practical thing to do, and that's what we do in California. We leave our cars on the street or in the driveway, and so this three-car garage is likely to become other accessory uses to the dwelling use, the living space that is in that building. If you go to the next pages, you'll find out that there are what are known as fire apparatus access roads. That's the term of art used in the fire code. Fire apparatus access roads. They are, what they have asked for is a waiver of the requirement to have an adequate fire apparatus access road within 150 feet of the building. The commentaries about the codes as they have been adopted by the state and by this is an international code, and it's kind of like, gee, what's international about it? It's primarily driven by the United States, and much of that is driven by California. The intent of having international codes is that the goal is to have uniformity among jurisdictions, so that if you're the Montecito Fire Department or the Ventura Fire Department or Oxnard or the county, and you're coming into the city to assist as they do routinely now in California, you need to know that that city, that area, has pretty much the same codes we have, so you know what to expect when you show up. And that is the purpose of the international code. The whole content of the commentary is that we don't want individual cities and counties and fire districts coming up with separate codes, because that defeats the intent of having a uniform code system. The city did adopt the code, and the most recent adoption was effective January 1, 2014. And when you go to the page of 189-2, it's the language that the fire marshal is talking about. He did not emphasize to you the fact that if you're going to grant an exception, there have to be two findings. Finding number one, that it's going to be sprinklers. This building has to have sprinklers because it's a dwelling use. It's a living use. It can't not be sprinklered under Santa Barbara's codes. Number two, it says fire access road cannot be installed because of location on property, topography, waterways, non-negotiable grades, or other similar conditions, and an approved alternate means of fire protection is provided. There's nothing about this lot that is inaccessible except for the fact that they are tearing down part of the access to the back and rebuilding it. The whole intent of these codes and the commentary as to what should be done is that you should not be creating a condition less safe in terms of compliance with the code than what you currently have. We don't want to expand legal nonconforming. We want to stick with the standard codes unless you have an extremely difficult, and that's usually because, and I would think this would happen in the Riviera where you've got hillsides, and it's impossible to have an access road that meets the requirements of this access road because everything is steep, narrow, crosswise. But this is not a situation where that kind of exception should be granted. And I really don't think we want to be saying to the public, when I look at the assessor's parcel map and all these other lots and say, you can all do the same thing. And we're going to end up having a row of buildings along the back of the lots in the middle of the block with no fire access because 1215 got it, I should get it. That's, in my view, the wrong approach toward administering the fire code. You have in front of the next page, I believe, if you go to it, it's labeled 1200 block of Coda Street. It's a one page, looks like this.
Should have some numbers on it.
Numbers on it. Oh, you got to keep going there. If you look at the assessor's parcel map, it says Coda Street is 60 feet wide. It isn't. I took my trusty tape measure out and measured it. As measured, from curb to curb, it is 29 feet. You will not find that information, and I could not find it, on the drawings. You will not find that in the fire marshal's information that he obtained and has presented to you regarding the status of Coda Street. I have asked a number of people to guess the width of Coda Street, and they all say 35 to 40. It's 29. It does not, with cars parked on both sides, does not meet the minimum definition of a fire access apparatus road. If you go back to the codes, which I've given you, the definition of a minimum unobstructed, which means no vehicles, the minimum unobstructed access road is 20 feet. This one is 13. So you are being asked to approve a variance of the 150-foot requirement, but it's maybe like a mile to the nearest approved 20-foot wide fire access road under these circumstances. This request should have begun with, show me the 20-foot wide access road, and then I'll start to consider the variance from the 150-foot requirement. I really don't know how we got here. It's like, why is this being appealed? Why is this being granted when Coda Street, as it exists, does not even qualify itself under the code? Can you imagine? People from other jurisdictions, they come down that street. When you're driving the fire truck, and you'll see some photos of vehicles on the street, you quickly get the picture that this is a narrow street. And we shouldn't be creating a situation where they have to drag out 250 feet of hose in order to get somewhere, and they shouldn't have to go out to 225 feet to rescue somebody when you don't have a good access road wide enough to handle the equipment that's going to come and be parked. You have also attached some definitions from the California Residential Code. The California Residential Code applies to single family and duplex buildings. And you see they have their definitions of living space, of what is living space and what should be subject to the code requirements for living space. And this is clearly living space. This is not. This is habitable space. This is not an accessory building down in the end of the lot that nobody spends any time in at night or evenings, no parties, that kind of thing. I think I've taken enough of time. What I would like at this point is Trevor is going to, we don't have as many copies of all of the photos, but we will pass them down as we, and you can take a look at them, see if you have any questions regarding them. I think they will highlight for you why this is a piece of road in Santa Barbara where we should be sticking to our codes. We shouldn't be afraid that 10 years from now somebody's going to say, how is it that all of those people were that far from the road and it took so long to rescue somebody? Because the road was narrow and it's further than normal when fire departments and rescue personnel pride themselves on how quickly they can get to the victims. And we shouldn't, this building could be slid over closer to the road and meet the 150-foot requirement. There's land area, there's open space that they're creating or they're leaving between the house and the garage. There is no necessity to push it down there at the end and ask for variance when I think we're trying to have modern codes where we don't grant variances, where we have uniformity and we have the modern approach to safety and not, I was very surprised to hear that, and Trevor will talk about it, that this goes on all the time. Nobody appeals. Well, the applicant isn't going to appeal if they grant it. The neighbor's not even going to know that it's been looked at. And the only reason the neighbor became aware of this one is because he did have an architect looking at the project and said, does this meet the fire code? Trevor?
Did you want to show him the last page 2, Tony? I'm not sure, the last diagram that we marked up. Does everyone understand what we're appealing?
No.
You don't? Okay, you still don't? All right, sorry. There's been a lot of...
I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I live on the Riviera.
Okay.
I was born there. There's probably 40 miles of streets on the east side, on the Riviera, Mission Canyon, God knows where, that are just as narrow as this. We've all been living with them. So why is this suddenly such a big
Okay,
problem?
Many of them do not have parking.
Oh, come on, you can go Coda, Haley, Montecito Street, Carpinteria Street, all those along there, people park, and they're narrow.
I don't want to argue with you, but I think if you drive Coda and you cross Milpas, you'd notice immediately that the Milpas at the
Commercial zone.
right. But Coda that we normally drive narrows. You don't have a dividing line when you get to the 1200 block. It's because the cars don't drive.
Have it on Haley.
Is Haley a one-way?
Haley's one way to Milpas.
Okay.
From Milpas, no, one way to Milpas and then to the next street. Then it becomes two-way.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, but the point is that the only access to the back of this with a fire apparatus truck is on Coda Street.
Mm-hmm.
There is no other way to get to the back of that property but other than Coda Street.
Well, I think that'd be the case on Haley. And
Okay, sure. So our argument is that you're extending that 150 feet. Isn't it unsafe to do so? It goes against the code, the premise of the fire code, which we have in the handout. So you're further making it, what I want to say, you're making the job harder for the firemen, for the emergency responders. You're taking a code as a minimum, because the codes are a minimum in the state of California, and you're increasing it when you really shouldn't, because the only fire apparatus access road there is Coda Street. You cannot get to that back of the lot when you look at that satellite picture anywhere else, not from Diana Road on the back, because there's fences, etc. You're putting it right in the middle when it doesn't need to be right there. It's just because the applicant desires it to be there, because in our opinion, based on talking with Mr. Martinson, this is phase 1 of 2 or 3 of future development. So that's what our issue is.
So are you appealing the fact that they're way in the back?
Vincent?
You wouldn't be here if they would put it up.
If it's within the 150 foot, if it's within the 150 foot distance to Coda Street, which would be the Apparatus Road, that's what but he's taking it another 50%, another 75 feet past the 150 foot minimum. Picture's worth 1,000 words. It's in the back of the packet that we gave you.
All right. Now
Okay.
I understand what you're. All right. That's your appeal.
That's what we're arguing is moving it up so it maintains within the 150 foot
Of Coda Street.
of Coda Street, because
Okay.
that's where the fire truck will be if there's ever a fire, being more conservative, more safe. So that's what our appeal is.
All right. Now I see.
Just so we understand what we're
Yeah.
discussing, is that
I
there's a
thought
lot
you
of
were
stuff
just
going
saying that
around here.
because Coda's so narrow,
Exactly.
but that would be the case on any of those streets.
Understand.
Yeah.
So
you're saying
so are we-
anybody on any of those streets should be within 150 feet.
Exactly, according to code.
And I don't think you have that many narrow, deep lots in that situation that are as deep as the ones in this one. This strip of Coda, you could see even on the next section, half of them are shorter.
Let me ask you, are you defining that this particular building next to the garage is habitable?
Yes.
Well, there's no shower.
It is not a dwelling unit, but it is habitable.
A
And
shower would only be
Habitable
required under
says-
landlord-tenant law.
Living, sleeping, eating, cooking, bathroom.
It has
And
a
then
bathroom.
it says toilet room, so I don't see that it has a shower that makes it, I wouldn't want to live there.
Well, it can be used as part of the house. You have people come and stay in the house. They can also go down and sleep in the game room.
Well, it doesn't to me define habitable, because it's missing important items.
The only thing I think it's missing is
There's a shower.
an oven and a shower.
There's no bath.
And you know what? That could
bathing.
easily be put in later. Easily. Change the
Well,
closet
sure, it
to
could
a
be put
shower.
in
Very
later
easily
against
done.
code, but somebody will pick them up and then get after the owner.
I'm sorry.
If he puts it in later, somebody's going to catch on to it and turn the odor in, and then we're going to have a bigger problem.
As a point of order, and
Then the damage is already done.
excuse me, for time's sake, let's stick to the application at hand and not speculate on what might happen later, as far as illegal work done or something like that. We'll be off for hours on that.
The one point I do want to make about that, sir, is that, and to the board, is that from our understanding, if future development is proposed and done on this lot, which it can because it has ample land to put 2 more units with this 6-car garage, hydraulic jacks, 2 stackable 2 on each other, 3 garages, 6 cars total. She could do that. But the variance that the fire marshal gave to her, or not gave to her, or approved for her, would run with the land, which means if you put units on top of the garage, now we're still further outside of our 150-foot limit, okay? Tenants on top in a habitable, as you define, a shower, fully functioning living quarters, we're outside the 150-foot limit. What happens when firemen go back there, emergency responders? They got to travel upstairs. They need their, there's just a myriad of things that could happen, which obviously we waste all day what ifs. But what I'm saying is that it will run with the land. Should the applicant or a future owner decide to build, they can, and this variance will run with that property, which we believe is very unsafe and a bad precedent to set for the city.
Can I ask you a question?
You have to ask it through the...
Okay, I have to ask you then. So this extension of the second floor goes beyond the 150?
No, ma'am, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm just saying that if in the future the applicant or a future owner were to build on top of this 3-car garage and accessory structure, which Mr. Jaime Limon at the city council meeting said she actually could do, or someone could do, it would be completely legal. And then if that were to happen, it would be outside the 150-foot limit that the code is trying to protect. Now you have people back there, which the accessory structure, you're still going to have people, and in a garage, you're still going to have people. So, but the point is that it could get much more complicated as the variance would run with the land.
Okay, I have to ask the city person. If he builds a second floor in the future, that's not necessarily true, that he would automatically get granted an extension beyond the 150 because they still have to prove those particular plans for the extension of the second floor unit according to present-day codes. Is that not correct?
Yeah, as the building official, they would have to come in and go through a building permit process, which would include a planning review and a fire prevention review. But I would defer to the decision on continuing the approval of the structure and the limited access to the fire marshal, because that would be their decision during that review process. So if Joe wants to come up and answer that, he can.
It would not run with the land?
No, it stays in the street file as a record of approval for what's proposed.
Okay.
When they come back in for development, we look at the conditions that we placed on that property. Just in general, we do this to see if there's anything special about that parcel that we've approved in the past, and then we see, is it still valid, or do we need to change it? Or
okay, but why? I don't know.
That's why we make it a public record and put it in the street file. And I know Steve and Trevor come in; they look at those to see what have we done. What's different.
Well, if we approved it once with an accessory structure and the definition of a dwelling unit in the back, most likely it would be approved again.
So this is, and I don't want to quell good, productive conversation, but let me just, I think you've made your point that in the future they could propose development, and this may be grandfathered or continued to exist. And I think if the board understands that, you've made your point. But if we talk about all the different possibilities, we could be here for a while.
Yeah, so. I don't think we need to speculate on the future right now. We need to address this appeal of the fire marshal, right?
Yes,
he's appealing the fire marshal's decision.
As a matter of order, yes, and consider, the implications of that appeal. And I think that's what the appellant's bringing forward is, they're looking down the future and they want you to consider that.
The way I understand the function of this board is you're sitting here today as the fire chief. you are making the decision regarding the safety of this situation. And you are making the decision and setting in a public record a precedent for equal treatment for others who come in and ask for the same waiver. And you, as acting with your fire chief hat, should treat people equally. And so you are doing more than just looking at one application when you are granting exceptions and waivers to a code. My suggestion is that you look at it far more seriously as to what road you want to go down and what requests in the future you want to encourage, or do you want to stick with the standard in the code, particularly when you have a street that is already deficient for purposes of standards. New streets in the city, new subdivisions over the last 30, 40 years don't create this situation. And there's a good reason for that. The fire marshals wouldn't approve those plans if they're creating dwelling or space, construction space, with outside the normal fire code limits. So we have these old situations. We shouldn't make them worse, in our view, for the purpose of protecting the city and protecting the firefighters and protecting the rescue people who all have to come and step into a situation. And I'm going to let Trevor lead you through the situation they're actually walking into when they come and respond to a request at this location.
Where is these people's property?
And while he's coming, here's a couple photos I took
They own this
looking down the
property?
street.
So where is our property?
Thank you, members of the board. I'm Trevor Martinson,
This guy
architect, planner, and forensic.
Well, that's important.
I came into this project at the request of,
Yeah, so Juliet, we can't have conversations
Okay.
unless they're in the microphone.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right. We just needed a moment to look at the,
thank you.
all right, thank you.
thank you. I came into this project at the request of Mr. Goldtrap and attended the first meeting that I was attending at Single Family Design Board. And I had the very same question, where is the fire access road? Then Ms. Galasse, the applicant, said, oh, I have a variance. First time anyone knew that this usual 16-foot minimum wide access road was going to have a variance. Well, what kind of a variance? I then went to Mr. Poirier and had a meeting with him regarding this, and it's my understanding that there were emails back and forth, and I requested copies, and they didn't have any. My question to Mr. Poirier was, what kind of a variance? And he said it's just one that's going to be along the east side, but didn't specifically say how wide, what needed to be done. So, with that being said, and I looked into the plans were very sketchy at this time, at the very beginning concept and preliminary review. But it became fairly apparent that the excuse for this big wide area from the existing residence to the proposed new garage and accessory structure, as it was called then, was a bocce court. This is just one great big lawn and you play with balls. Well, why a bocce court there when you can comply with all of the fire code requirements by bringing your new proposed garage and accessory structure within the 150-foot limit? The item 4 that Mr. Poirier mentioned has 150 on it, and if you put your fingers on the proposed garage and come up, you will see that everything that is being proposed here will comply with the 150-foot limit. Why is that not being done? The only thing that I can think of is that if you get this wonderful variance, that you can come back later, and again, I'm sorry to have to think into the future, but this is a space for another apartment. And I don't think that that, is going to work very well with this very small access. In fact, we did have some pictures, and I think we'll pass out some of them now, that show the front of the residence, the gate that is proposed to allow firefighters in, and then looking over.
So the public needs to have access to the copy of the picture or have it displayed on a screen. Maybe the best way to do this would be to just pass the picture down and make a picture available for the public.
Okay, that's fine.
That works for you.
Next time we should have the screen up here and make it much easier.
Yeah. Let it go around. Yeah, if you want to do that, but somehow make one available for the members of the public. Well, I don't think the fire marshal has seen the photos. I don't know if the property owner has seen them.
Well, while he's passing it around, we're appreciative of your being here today and expressing your viewpoint, because it has to be both sides, explaining everything. So thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure, and you're serving. I was here when you first started. Andrew started it, and I thought it was wonderful that all of you, especially some of you that have been here many, many years, are still here to...
May I ask you the question?
Yes.
As to subject property for discussion, where are you located on this picture here? Is this you?
Yeah. No, I'm right there.
Oh, you're here? I got it. Okay, so you're there.
Yeah. This is here.
That's the parcel.
This is a subject for discussion, of course. Okay.
So for the purposes of the audio record that we're making, your property is to the east? Is that?
To the north.
North? Okay.
On the compass.
Okay. Thank you.
Toward APS.
Could you show where that is?
I can
It's
show,
not
and then they
clear
can...
here what he's talking about.
The issue that we have here, I think, is that this picture here shows what is considered the clear access. And this is going to be difficult to do.
Could you hold just a second?
Sure.
I just pointed out. For the record, I just pointed out to one of the board members, the neighbor who's here, which side of the subject parcel he's on.
Okay. So we're looking at what I call, and I pointed out to the city attorney at the appeal review, is that we got a great tripper here. It's a downspout that comes down, and it's up about 6, if you'll look right here, it's up about 6 feet and comes out about 1.5 feet. That's a great tripper to catch a fireman's foot as he's going through. When I hear the word clear, that doesn't mean that there's debris of fixed downspout that's there to trip people, or that there is a big can of water or trash. It has to be kept clear. And again, this one also shows the tripper that's out there.
Could I ask a question to the...
Yes.
Wouldn't this also be the case if they move the building up to within 150 feet?
No, then they don't have to provide any. This is the thing that is so frustrating, is that if you move everything up within 150 feet, there's no problem. We don't need fire road access. We don't need anything.
Well, how's the fire department going to get back there?
They don't have to. They're within 150 feet. They're going to come through the side yard, one way or other, or through the arch.
I don't know if you understand this question.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it would be an alternate path too. The point is the distance and the time factor involved of increasing 75 feet 50% of the allowable minimum limit per the code.
Right.
So yeah, this would obviously probably have to be corrected. Fireman doesn't want to trip over that
Right.
or have trash cans to walk around.
And when you do,
in a 5-foot 2 passageway.
Yeah.
and when you
the
do
same
look
pathway.
at
It'll
that,
be the same pathway. The key is emergency responders to the very back. Emergency equipment to the back to fire
in the
suppress.
back of the property, which is the big issue. And as we all know, embers come within a mile of a fire, they start a fire. And you have to have access. And the shorter access, the less time that the firemen have to worry about. And I think that's a very important issue. And why not? Why are we here? Only because a proposed structure is beyond that 150-foot limit, and it's going to happen on half a dozen more of these properties.
For time's sake, I'm going to ask that let's try to stick to new information and not. We've established that the structure that's proposed is set back on the property, that there's a potential if to have it redesigned to be in the middle. So,
Right. Well, now to address Mr. Poirier's comment that they do this all the time. Okay, if they do this all the time, I made a public records request for the last 2 years, and I wanted to see all of the things that had been done by the fire department regarding a variance, and I found only one out of the 28 papers that I received from the city, and it regarded 1818 Castillo Street. It's a 225-foot depth lot, and obviously it is commercial. They're reducing the fire access road from 20 feet to 18 and a half feet. No fire access road for this project, but this one they required only a foot and a half off, and I think one of the reasons was that there was a balcony that might hit somebody in the head. But that's the only thing I could find in 2 years that Mr. Poirier did regarding a fire access road. And there were 28 documents that I reviewed. Maybe I'm going to have to go back and get 5 years and see if there's more back then. But to me, he hasn't been giving very many variances, and to me, this one is a very unusual variance. No fire access road. Just give me a little piece along the building so my guys can go through and trip and fall. Okay. But if you pull everything back to the 150-foot line, I don't have to be here, nor does Mr. Goldtrap. We don't have to be here. But the reason for it is this exception to something that I think could have been very easily taken care of. Put the bocce court down at the other end of the house lot. That's pretty simple.
And one thing is moving it up is not impractical. It's not a constrained site to do so. So there's nothing about the site that would not allow this 6-car garage to be moved up within that 150-foot limit. Just want to point that out.
One more comment here regarding the chair that, now I'll call you the chair, that lived in the Riviera. I've been up there 37 years myself, and I know those narrow roads, and twice that I had to come out when the T-fire and all those things were coming down. Really difficult. Cars jam. And even when we even had red line, no parking on a lot of those streets. I see Coda Street, if this is going to go ahead, they're going to have to put one side all red, no parking out in Coda Street, just to get the fire engines in. That, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense. So, again, I think that our appeal should be upheld, and the applicant just changed the location of her garage and accessory room.
Okay.
Thank you. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Your compadre showed me where your lot is compared to the subject property under discussion.
Yes, Mr. Goldtrap, yes.
Yes,
It's right
and I
next
see
door.
that you have, you use your whole lot as far as with structures all the way back. Do you have access all the way back for fire?
Ma'am, I just bought the property almost exactly 2 years ago, so that's the way I bought it. We have a fence, a gate that opens up, It's probably non-conforming now, so legally non-conforming. But yeah, we have a 6-foot on the north side, and on the south side, probably it's less than that. It's probably 4 or 5 feet.
What you're seeing in
But it's
his property is concrete at the back. You see white, it looks like a structure. It isn't.
That's
it's
just
all
a concrete pad.
It's a concrete
we left
pad.
there.
Okay, any other questions from the board members of the appellant?
But he's not conforming also.
Any questions of the board members for the fire marshal? And are there any public speakers that would like to speak? Do you need to speak?
Yeah, I'd like to just do that.
Sure.
I'm just going to make it quick and dirty.
Please announce your. Thank you.
I'm the owner at 1215.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Did you speak
She
into
just
the mic?
moved it. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now? Is it working?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hardly.
My name is Leslie Colas. I'm the owner at 1215 East Coda Street, which is the subject parcel that's under discussion today. The project as planned has been reviewed by the Single Family Design Review Board.
I'm sorry, I still can't hear what's going on.
Well, we've got a couple that are on, so move
Are
it.
we okay now?
Move it a little closer to you. It has to be uncomfortably close, unfortunately. Well, unless we turn
Maybe
it
I
up.
can just kiss it.
You're doing
Okay.
great. Okay.
There's a lot of conjecture about what may happen on my parcel, and I want to make it very clear that we are reviewing what is in front of you today, and that any conjecture on the part of the appellant is simply that, both in terms of future development as well as the use of spaces that they've been discussing today. The accessory structure is a man cave. Yes, there will be a bar sink there if it is allowed by the building department, but we haven't gotten that far enough in the process for me to even determine whether they're going to allow that. Yes, there will be an under-counter refrigerator for beer and sodas, and there's a potty room back there. Does that mean somebody's going to be sleeping back there or that it's going to be rented out? No, that's not the intent. That's not what's before you. It's sprinkled. My understanding with sprinklered conditions is that it eliminates the need for attention to fire conditions to the point where half the time they arrive and the fire's already out. It's the point of sprinkling the buildings. If my son is back there or my boyfriend is back there or somebody's back there watching TV in the man cave or doing whatever they're doing, I wouldn't want them to be at risk. I'm sprinkling the building because that's the right thing to do. It also provides some latitude on the fire department's part to make the decisions that they've made. I've gone through what I understand to be the normal channels to do that, and a decision has been made. Everybody's talking about the precedent that you might set here for the city or for the fire marshal or future development on other parcels if this appeal is not upheld. But on the flip side of that, there's a very dangerous precedent that you would also be setting where you would be diminishing your fire marshal's capability to make rational decisions about his firefighters and their ability to do their job. So when you make this decision, please consider that. Mr. Poiret's been in the business for years. I've worked with him for years. I know he cares about his firefighters. He's not going to make poor decisions. He wouldn't be in the position that he is if he did. So that's all I really want to say.
I have a question.
Yes.
Why are you reluctant to put the building up closer to the Coda Street?
I have a lovely lot. It's 225 feet deep. We love to garden. We love the outdoor space. And we'd like that space to be between the two structures so that we can appreciate it from both structures. And, you know, I grew up in town and there's a lot of properties that are similar. And they have kind of a carriage house at the back. And it's a lovely feel to have the garden between the two spaces. And that was the intent in the design. And that's simply why we've placed it there. We thought it was the right place for it and for the lot. You will be seeing more development in our neighborhood I believe in the near future, from some information that I have about adjacent parcels. So I think that there are going to be ample opportunities to continue the conversation about how this particular area in town is protected from a fire standpoint.
Any other questions of the public speaker, the owner? Okay, hearing none, then we'll.
I'd like to ask the fire marshal.
Am I allowed to rebut?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Well, go ahead. We'll give you a couple minutes to rebut something if you'd like, the appellant, and then we have a question for the fire marshal from one of the board members.
Second here. Just a couple comments from the applicant regarding sprinklers. So of course, yesterday I did a bunch of research on sprinklers, and I'm sure the fire marshal can come up here and give all the great statistics about sprinklers, and they are a good thing. I mean, I admit, they're technology, the way it's come, it's a good thing. However, not 97, I mean about 97%. Oh, let me rephrase that. 97% success rate, I believe. But I did find out the problems when I was doing research yesterday, and they don't always work all the time. And some of the reasons for that are that have led to decreased sprinkler performance and malfunctions, such as inadequate water supply interruption, system design, installation, and maintenance, material defects of the sprinkler system, and possibly seismic activity. So even though, yes, it is a benefit, works the majority of the time, sometimes it doesn't. It's kind of like flying an airplane. Are you going to let the pilots fly the plane from takeoff to landing, or do you want somebody there just in case the system doesn't work? Not 100%, but much better than we had 10, 20, 50 years ago, because they've been around for a long time. That's number one. And today we're not questioning the authority or just trying to disrespect the fire marshal in any way, as the applicant states. I know he's experienced, I know he does a good job in this town, and again, this is nothing personal, but what we are here today, and it falls under your limitations on authority, and I'll read it verbatim, is an application for appeal shall be based on a claim that the intent of this code or rules legally adopted hereunder have been incorrectly interpreted. The provisions of this code do not fully apply, or an equivalent method of protection or safety is proposed. The board shall have no authority to waive requirements of this code. So we're here today to basically ask, is this variance in accordance with the fire code and its intent? Which again, we've outlined the fire code. There's 2 pages in there that I've highlighted in red that talk about purpose, scope, and intent. And it's to, increase public safety for welfare, life safety, property safety, etc. For firefighters to go in, minimal time, get the job done, pull people out, take care of people medically, whatever it is. That's our goal here. And increasing it 50% more than what the minimum is taking time and risk away from a potentially bad situation. So that's what we're challenging today, is not personally the fire marshal or personally the applicant. We're saying, what's going to be the best interest of this area when you look at that Google Earth shot and see that this 3-car garage or 6-car garage is stuck back there with an accessory unit that can be built on, whatever, I won't speculate, that if you increase the distance and not move it up when there's no impractical reason not to.
Let's try and stick to new information that you're refuting or rebutting.
So I'm sorry, I got off on a tangent. I just want to make sure everybody knows what we're doing, what we're appealing. Any more questions for me? Or
board members? No? Oh, Jim?
I've been holding my comments until I heard everything that everybody had to say.
We do have one of the board members does want to ask a question of the fire marshal.
Okay.
Do you want to defer till later for your comment? Or would
I'll
you like
wait.
to make
Let
it?
Joe do it.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
no more questions for me?
No.
Okay.
Sir, Mr. Fire Marshal, so we're here for life, liberty, safety, and health, and you're here to protect those. I want to see if this is a thin argument. I noticed this was given to us by the attorney. It was enlarged. It shows the back. But it also says this, accessory/garage floor plan. And since this is a garage floor plan, garage is under building and safety is considered not adding density to living space. And therefore, if it is not adding density to living space, it's not related to living space. And this is the reason why you made your decision, because you don't need to cover this as habitable.
That's correct.
Okay, that's it.
The garage is a U occupancy, as near as we can tell.
That's it.
Now, I'm sorry, that was on. Let me repeat that because the mic wasn't on. The garage is a U occupancy, as near as we can tell from the plans. Now, there's a lot of talk here about future things that may go on. You correctly pointed out there's no shower. This is obviously not a living space. It's just not. The appellant's hyperbole notwithstanding. So that's the basis for it. I mean, you have a garage at the rear of a property is what we're looking at.
I consider your logic correct.
And if I could just add a little bit to this, first of all, I've never seen so many experts on fire safety. I was in the T fire and in the middle of it, and I didn't see any of these people there. We are the fire department. We look out for fire safety. The firefighters that these gentlemen are so concerned about are not just my coworkers, they're my colleagues and friends. This is not a situation where I cavalierly throw fire code requirements out the window. This is just a normal variance in the course of normal business. And even as Mr. Martinson was talking, I was looking at the documents that we gave him, and there were several access variances in there that he just failed to mention to you. In any case, when this came before City Council and the appellant brought this up, they appealed it at City Council on a view basis. It was turned down on the view basis, and basically what this is a view appeal disguised as a fire code appeal. Fire safety is met by this project. I'm completely comfortable that our firefighters will be safe. I'm not worried about that. And so let's look at it for what it really is.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions of the fire marshal? Hearing none, they're from the board at this point. Hearing none, then we'll move. Thank you. And we'll move to board comments.
I've held my tongue, but I do have a few comments to make based on notes that I've taken. First of all, I was a fire marshal for many years, and at one point in time, a subdeveloper called me out to his site. He wanted to talk about the road I was requiring him to provide for access. I wanted a 20-foot road, 4 homes, and he says, hold this end of the tape. He took me out to the center of, to the edge of Sycamore Canyon. It's a state highway. It was 19 feet wide. It was a very difficult situation. Unfortunately, it came early in my career, and I got to grow past that. I came to realize that if I were to require 150 foot, I'd have to pave entirely around the perimeter of the houses that I was dealing with. The fire code was basically developed in 1972. It's less than 50 years old. Many of these houses, these roads, are all older than that. Things carried from that. There were standards that were put in place. We saw pictures of 3-foot setbacks on the sides. Those setbacks are simply to allow a fireman to carry a ladder or to carry a fire hose. That 150-foot length is there because at the time those hoses were very heavy, cotton jacketed hoses, and to get the flow through one of those hoses, you just really couldn't go more than 150 feet. In the meantime, so many mitigations have come into place, so many, that some of these standards that were there, and mind you, I've been on these code committees. I was on them at least 10 different times, these national and state codes. And this is carryover is what it is. It needs to be amended, should be amended, and I did amend it where I worked in the codes. We have new technologies. The hoses are different. They have a different flow characteristic to them. Cities, as far as I know, has had 300-foot long attack lines for 30-plus years, period. That's been their road to hoe for that long. The second thing is that as it comes to driving these trucks, we don't try to take them onto properties. The damage the trucks do to properties is enormous. It's very costly with the sort of hardscapes we have here in Santa Barbara and Montecito. So we really want to stay off the property with our trucks if we can at all. I guess in conclusion, I would like to say that I routinely allowed a 300-foot distance to accessory buildings such as this. Routinely, I had to. That's the only way we could avoid unnecessary environmental takings, allow people to continue with the existing uses that they had with their homes. So, to me, the water's already under the bridge. This is an issue that's routine. It shouldn't be here. I would like to make a motion at this point, if I can, to deny the appeal, please.
Okay. There's a motion on the floor. And we have a second?
I second.
Okay. Do we have discussion of the motion? Is there any board members that wanted to discuss this or air an alternate opinion or observation? Okay, hearing none, let's take a vote. All in favor?
Of denial.
Of denial of the appeal and upholding the fire marshal's decision. All in favor?
In favor.
All opposed? Oh, that's unanimous. The fire marshal's decision's upheld, and the appeal is denied.
Okay.
Okay, we're still working through the meeting here, so I'm going to ask the chair to come back in the room, and we'll work through our adjournment. Please don't leave your seat.
I know, chewing his nails.
There you go. Okay. We're so sorry. We couldn't do it, but
All the photos that were presented. Hang on one second. So if you presented photos, we do need one copy of each photo, each document that was presented. So I have the packet, and if you want to just put together a bundle of the photos, that would be great, and then we'll have it for the record. Welcome back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much.
You're here for the adjournment.
I'm here for the adjournment.
So you can go. You can go right ahead.
Okay.
We need to
Motion.
get. Yeah.
Motion for adjournment. Second.
Second.
All in favor?
what was the motion?
Thank you.
Adjournment.
Oh,
Yeah. Thank you.
I got a lunch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Andrew.
We can stop the recording now.